Good morning, everyone. I would say let's start. Yeah, I got two questions, and I think I will handle two questions here because one is a follow-up from the last one from me, and another one is I think yeah, let's say a quick one. So yeah, let me do the follow-up first, and then the new one. So the follow-up is let me read this here. Is some time ago my question: loading CDC data into multi-active satellites and status tracking satellites was handled in Data Vault Friday by Mark, so by me. So, however, the second part related to status tracking was not really covered. So, could you please handle this part? At the moment, I only see the solution of comparing full extracts. So, this is what I will do first, and then I will continue with the question on how does Data Vault add value when we have a delta lake. So, all right, let's go. We have to bring in a small example here again to show you what multi-active data means is that we have for the same business key. In this case here, this is the second column we see here, right? So this is our customer, and we have two times the same customer here arrived at the same time, right? So this is what you see here at the load date timestamp. And so that means the customer exists two times in our source system. And this means, so the one question here is, so what is the primary key then in the source system? It's usually not then the business key, it's maybe some technical IDs, right? And in this case here, it's maybe a customer ID or sometimes just like columns called ID, right? And to bring in the CDC part here as well, this is what we see on the very right side on this column here. We see this CUD column. So CUD stands for create, update, and delete. So these are usually the three operations we get from CDC, right? And here you can also see that we get two times the C, so two times the create. So that means this this status here, or this let's say transaction here on the source system, is related to the primary key in the source, right? So to the first column. And here you see a difference. We have source column number, or the customer ID number 1 and number 2, but with the same business key here. In such cases, we insert the data, all the descriptive columns, into a multi-active satellite. And here I would like to cover also how to do that with the status tracking satellites. So first of all, a status tracking satellite has the intention to track these three operations in the source system: the creation, the updates, whereby the updates is more or less not the main focus. It's more about the appearance and the disappearance of my business keys, or yeah, of my business objects in the source system. And as soon as we get CDC data, a status tracking satellite is not really necessary, because we get the data from the source, right? So that we get the data here, the information, when the customer, when the ID or the business key here got created, when it got updated, and when it got deleted. So we have all this information. So there's usually no special entity to create to yeah, get this information, right? So that means why we have status tracking satellites is when we have full loads. In full loads, we have to figure out the C, the U, and the D, the create, the update, and delete on our own, right? So we have to figure out the first appearance of a customer. We have to, by doing delta checks, we have to figure out whether there's an update or not, or if we just got the same data as yesterday for the same customer. And we need to figure out when the customer got deleted, so when it got removed from the source, right? And this is where status tracking satellite can really help you to yeah, detect this, right? So by just tracking the appearance and then figuring out, okay, when does it stop to appear, and or when did we detect a delta? So when is the hash diff from one day to another different? This is maybe then the U, right? And when we see the customer the first time, this is the C. So that means we create our own, let's say, or status tracking satellite in the or the just the appearance, and derive the C, the U, and the D from the status tracking satellite in Data Vault. But anyway, if we want to know where to when the customer appeared the first time, how often it got updated, and when it got deleted from which source system. Um, in from real life projects, usually I try at least to add this column here, the CUD column, to a normal satellite, right? So let's say I have my main satellite, I get where I have the most data from the customer. I just attach this CUD column to that satellite. So then I have the information there. If you want to isolate this information into the status tracking satellite, for example, you can do so, right? Let me extend the example here to make it a bit more interesting. On the next day here, we see that we got a delete, but this delete only refers to the customer ID number one, right? So this is also important to know here for multi-active, is that not the whole customer got deleted, but the combination of the customer number with the multi-active attribute, which is the customer ID here in this case. So how would this look like in our status tracking satellite here? We don't just add and when we get full loads, we usually don't have the CUD column, right? So it doesn't we don't have this information, right? But here, because we have this, we can add the CUD column into the status tracking satellite when we have CDC data, and with the addition here with multi-active data. So that means the status tracking satellite would look like this. Usually the business key, I keep the business key here for better readability, but this is usually the hash key then, the customer hash key. Then we need, of course, the multi-active attribute. We need to keep it that we don't mark the whole customer as deleted because the customer still exists. It's just the technical ID number one which got deleted in the source, not the number two. So that means we still keep here the number two as, let's say, that the customer is still in the source system. And yeah, the CUD column here in that case is just the payload, right? So we can here only just add you don't even need the delta check, right? So if you want to figure out how often a customer changes or any value, any attribute of the customer change, then just let's say load the data without the hash diff, without the delta check, just load the data from the CDC source into the status tracking satellite. And the CUD would just be here the payload, right? As the first name, last name, address, or a customer score, any other attribute would be in a normal satellite. It's just the C, U, and D here in the status tracking satellite. And then you can analyze it, and you don't have to, in that case, you don't have to calculate now when it got first inserted, how often it appears, and when it got deleted, right? So you don't need to apply any logics anymore because we have all the information available. We have the C, the U, and the D. So this is what we would track here. And as I mentioned, you maybe have a lot of updates in between. Let's say the customer got created, it gets updated 10 times, and then it got deleted. So you would have then 10 more use here, for example, that you also can track this. So again, here the status tracking satellite is only for getting a better overview of your keys, the behavior of your keys, especially across the systems. To be fair here, I didn't add the record source, right? So this would be interesting if you want to see how does the customer C123 behaves in different systems, right? So is it maybe deleted in 4 other systems and only alive in one remaining system? Then we need to talk about prioritization, right? So when do we consider, for example, in our end reports, a customer as deleted when it got removed from all the systems or from the main system if there is one, and so on, right? So then we are again in the area business vault and the logics. But for just catching the data here, this is how let's say I would build a status tracking satellite when I get CDC data. To be honest, I've never done this because I was fine having this CUD column in a normal satellite. But of course, you can do a satellite. It's just a satellite split here, basically, right? So that's basically it. Status tracking satellite is needed on business key, not on ID. That's true. Here, usually, if we don't have multi-active data, we would get the status tracking, of course, directly on the business key, right? But in this case here, we need to, um, let's say, accept the status that we have multiple rows active at the same time for the customer, and single multi-active rows can be removed from the source, but the whole customer is not, right? So that means you need to you have to consider the two columns always when you query now the status tracking satellite. You need to get the combination, the maximum loaded timestamp for the combination customer ID and customer business key, and then filter out the Ds. And when the business key is gone, then it's completely removed from the source. If it still appears with just one or two multi-active attributes, then it's still there, right? So that's the way of the interpretation of this status tracking satellite containing multi-active data is a little bit different, right? So you always, but it's the same as for normal satellites. You always need to consider the both columns, the business key plus the multi-active attributes. Then the next question here is how does Data Vault add value when we have a Delta Lake? So first of all, Data Vault is a methodology while the Delta Lake is a technology, right? So that means so first of all, it's you cannot really compare, in my opinion, you cannot really compare these two terms, Delta Lake and Data Vault. So, but let's have a look on how you can combine it, right? So, or what are the things what you can do with the Delta Lake and what with the Data Vault and how to combine it. So the Data Lake, to be honest, I'm not the expert here in the Delta Lake technology with the Iceberg technology, but just know the basics. But the Delta Lake makes it easier to remain on, let's say, original data structures, right? Semi-structured data, JSON data, XML data, and so on, and track the deltas in this native file storage by adding way more metadata to it, which this is, in my opinion, the key part here, which makes the difference between a data lake and the Delta Lake. That the data lake is just I have to be careful with the term here, a data dump, right? So we just dump the data in. Of course, you need the structure and to get the data out properly there as well. But the Delta Lake adds a way more metadata and statistics to the data itself, which makes queries on top of it much easier, right? So and even with but what the Delta Lake, basically the technology doesn't tell you is how you should model the data, how you should work, right? With an agile approach. How does my architecture looks like? Yes, I know they have this bronze, silver, gold layers, right? And tell you a little bit what should happen where. But DataWord, for example, here brings much more details into these different layers into the architecture. And also the logics you need to apply to, for example, do any business logic, right? So what we would do in the business vault in Data Vault, and the data lake doesn't tell you really, right? So it's just a technology which I think can be really well used in combination with Data Vault, right? So also in the Data Vault reference architecture, we have kind of a landing zone, right? So on this landing zone, what we call the persistent staging area, this could be, for example, a perfect Delta Lake, right? So where you get all the data from the sources into your persistent staging area with the Delta Lake technology, where you can easily store the deltas in its native formats, right? And then process it further with more, let's say, in a structured way, more in a SQL way, right? So I think I see much potential here in combining these two things or using a data vault on a data lake technology. So therefore, yes, of course, Data Vault adds value to a Delta Lake or on any other database technologies, however they work in the background. So yeah, so these are my words on this, my points on this. So yeah, do you have any further questions here? Okay, then thank you as well for joining and maybe see you next time. All right. Thank you. Have a nice weekend. Bye bye.